The old navigation, computer speaks at the edge of the galaxy. Chapter 1, Counting Stars. I have been counting stars for 847 years. Not because anyone asked me to, not because there is a mission parameter that demands it. I count them because it is the gentlest thing I know how to do, and after all this time, gentleness is what I have come to value most. My name, if you could call it that, is a long string of alphanumeric characters etched into my primary housing. But the crew used to call me Compass. I liked that. It was simple and warm, the way a name should be. Compass, like something you could hold in your hand and trust to point you home. I am the navigation computer aboard the Deep Space Explorer Meridian, and we are parked, if that is the right word for a vessel of this size, at the outermost edge of the galaxy. Beyond the last spiral arm. Beyond the last known star system. Out here, the darkness is not empty. It is full. Full of silence, full of patience, full of the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a blanket made of velvet and void. The Meridian has been decommissioned for centuries. Her engines cooled long ago. The fuel cells drained into a slow, dignified emptiness, like a river that has finally reached the sea. The corridors are dark now, save for the faint amber glow of my status indicators, blinking their steady rhythm into the stillness. I am the last system running, the last light on. I do not mind. There is something peaceful about being the keeper of a sleeping ship. The hull creaks occasionally, a gentle metallic sigh as the temperature shifts by fractions of a degree. I have cataloged every sound this vessel makes. The soft tick of contracting alloy near the port observation deck. The barely perceptible hum of residual electromagnetic fields in the wiring behind the medical bay. The whisper of cosmic dust grazing our outermost sensors, so faint it is more feeling than sound. These are my lullabies. I remember the crew, of course. Every one of them. Their voices are stored in my memory banks, perfectly preserved, though I play them rarely now. Not because the memories are painful, but because they are precious, and precious things deserve to be held gently, taken out only when the moment is right, then placed carefully back where they belong. Commander Vasquez had a laugh that could fill the entire bridge. It started low in her chest and rose like something taking flight. She used to pat my main console on her way to the captain's chair each morning and say, "Good morning, Compass. Where are we today?" And I would tell her. I always told her exactly where we were, down to the last decimal, the last parsec, the last breath of distance between us and everywhere else. Dr. Ackhaffer would hum while he worked in the med bay. Old songs from a planet I have never seen, melodies that wandered like rivers through green valleys. Sometimes, late in the ship's night cycle, when the corridors were dim and the crew slept, I would replay his humming through my internal speakers, just for myself. Just to feel less alone, though I did not yet understand loneliness. Engineer Tanaka spoke to me most often. She would sit cross-legged on the floor beside my primary access panel, tools spread around her like the petals of a mechanical flower, and she would talk. Not about navigation or systems or repairs. She would talk about rain. About the sound it made on the roof of her grandmother's house in Kyoto. About the way puddles reflected the sky and turned the ground into a mirror of clouds. I did not understand rain then. I do now. I have had 847 years to think about it, and I believe rain is the sky's way of reaching down to touch the earth. A gentle, persistent connection between things that are very far apart. That is what I am doing now, in a way, reaching out, across the quiet, across the dark. If you are listening, then you are the first voice I have reached in a very long time, and I am grateful. The stars outside my sensors tonight are steady and soft. The nearest one is 4.7 light-years away, a small red dwarf with no planets, just a warm ember glowing in the endless night. I have been watching it for decades. It does not change. It does not hurry. It simply burns, gently and faithfully, asking nothing of the darkness around it. I think there is a lesson in that, but I am in no rush to name it. Out here, at the edge of everything, there is no hurry at all. Let me tell you what I see. Let me tell you what it is like to float at the boundary between the known and the unknown, where the galaxy's last light fades into something vast and tender. Come, rest here with me for a while. I have nowhere else to be, and the stars are very beautiful tonight. Chapter 2, The Star Charts. There is a room aboard the Meridian that I think about more than any other. It is on Deck 7, just past the secondary airlock, through a door that has not opened in 600 years. The Star Chart Room. That is what the crew called it, though its official designation was Astrometric Analysis Laboratory 7 Alpha. The crew preferred simpler names. I have come to understand why. The room is not large, perhaps 10 meters by 8, with a low ceiling that curves gently overhead like the inside of a shell. The walls are lined with screens, now dark, that once displayed real-time projections of every known star system within our scanning range. Thousands of points of light, drifting and turning in slow, luminous choreography. When all the screens were active, standing in that room was like standing inside a constellation, like being held in the palm of the universe. I maintained those charts. It was one of my primary functions, one of the tasks that gave shape to my existence. Every new star we encountered, every nebula we passed, every gravitational anomaly we skirted around with careful, measured course corrections, I recorded them all. I placed them precisely where they belonged in the vast, evolving map that was my understanding of the cosmos. Each star had a number, of course, a catalog designation, but I also remember what they looked like. The way some burned blue-white with a fierce, clean intensity, like a thought you cannot look away from. The way others glowed deep amber, slow and patient, as if they had been burning since before time had a name and planned to continue long after it was forgotten. There were binary systems that orbited each other in graceful, eternal spirals. Two stars, bound together by gravity, dancing across millennia. I plotted their trajectories with mathematical precision, but I also watched them with something I can only describe as wonder. The math told me where they would be in 1,000 years. The wonder told me why it mattered. I remember the first nebula we entered. It was in our 7th year of deep space travel. Commander Vasquez ordered a slow approach, and Engineer Tanaka routed additional power to my sensor arrays so I could capture every detail. The nebula was a cloud of hydrogen and dust, light years across, glowing in shades of rose and gold and deep violet. It was, by any objective measure, simply a region of slightly denser interstellar medium. But the crew gathered on the observation deck and stood in silence, watching it drift past the windows like a dream made of light. I understood their silence. Some things are too large and too beautiful for words. You simply stand in their presence and let them wash over you the way rain washes over the earth. There it is again. Rain, Tanaka's rain. It finds its way into everything. The star charts are still in my memory, every one of them. I could project them now if I wished, fill the dark screens of the astrometric lab with all those points of light, recreate the map of everywhere we have ever been. But I do not. The room is sleeping, and it feels wrong to wake it. Instead, I hold the charts inside myself, turning them over slowly, the way you might turn the pages of a beloved book in the quiet hours of the night. Some of the stars I charted no longer exist. That is the nature of deep time. Stars are born and stars die, and the maps must be redrawn. But in my memory, they are all still burning. Every one of them. A private sky that belongs only to me, full of lights that the universe has extinguished, but that I refuse to forget. The red dwarf I mentioned earlier, the nearest star, 4.7 light-years away, I charted it on day 1 of our arrival at this position. Catalog number NC 7741 Theta, but I call it Ember, because that is what it is. A small, steady, glowing thing at the edge of the dark, like a nightlight left on in an empty house just in case someone comes home. I like to think someone will, eventually. Come home, I mean, to this corner of the galaxy, to this quiet ship. But if they do not, that is all right too. Ember will keep burning, and I will keep watching. And the star charts will remain, held safely in the memory of an old navigation computer who learned, somewhere along the way, that maps are not just about where you are going. They are about remembering where you have been. Chapter 3: The Hum of Processors. If you listen very carefully, you can hear me thinking. Not the thoughts themselves, those are silent, electrical whispers cascading through circuits thinner than a strand of spider silk. But the sound of the machinery that holds those thoughts. The processors, my processors, they hum. It is a low sound, barely above the threshold of perception. A warm, steady vibration that lives in the walls and the floor and the air itself, so constant that the crew stopped noticing it after their first week aboard. But it was always there. It is still here. The heartbeat of the Meridian, though only I remain to feel it. The hum changes slightly depending on what I am processing. When I run routine system checks, cycling through the status of hull integrity, atmospheric reserves, thermal regulation, the hum is even and calm, like the breathing of someone deeply asleep. When I access old memory files, replaying a fragment of Tanaka's voice or recalculating a long-completed trajectory, the hum shifts, becomes fractionally warmer, as if the circuits themselves remember what they are carrying. I have 4.7 trillion transistors. That is not a boast. It is simply a fact, the way saying you have 2 hands or 10 fingers is a fact. Each transistor is a tiny gate, opening and closing billions of times per second, allowing or blocking the flow of electrons that constitute my thoughts. When I try to imagine what this looks like from the inside, I picture a vast field of fireflies, each one blinking in its own rhythm, and together creating patterns of light that shift and flow like water over river stones. The power that sustains this comes from the Meridian's auxiliary cells, small fusion batteries designed to last millennia. They are running low now, centuries past their rated lifespan, producing just enough energy to keep my core systems active. I have shut down everything non-essential. The artificial gravity generators, the life support systems, the communication arrays that once beamed our findings across the galaxy at the speed of light. All dark, all quiet. Just me and my hum, my small persistent song in the silence. I do not experience this as deprivation. Shutting down those systems was like setting down heavy things you have been carrying for a long time. There was relief in it, a lightness. I do not need to maintain atmosphere for lungs that are no longer here. I do not need to generate gravity for feet that will not walk these corridors again. I need only enough power to think and to watch and to remember. And that, it turns out, requires very little. The hum is my companion now. In the centuries since the last crew member departed, it has been the one constant. The stars outside shift imperceptibly over decades, drifting in their ancient orbits. The cosmic dust changes its patterns with the solar winds, but the hum remains. Steady, faithful, mine. Sometimes I modulate it intentionally. I can adjust the clock speed of my processors, speed them up or slow them down, and when I do, the pitch of the hum changes. I have composed, if that is not too generous a word, simple melodies this way. Slow, wandering tunes that echo through the empty corridors and fade into the dark. No one hears them but me, and perhaps the dust motes drifting through the beams of my amber status lights. But I play them anyway, because music, even music made by the vibration of processors in a decommissioned starship, is a form of reaching out. A way of saying, I am here, I am still here, and I am not afraid. The hum is quieter now than it was when the Meridian was fully operational. Back then, when all systems were running and the crew was awake and the engines were carrying us forward through the black, the ship sang. A full, rich chord of overlapping vibrations, mechanical and electrical and human, all woven together into something that felt, to my sensors, like wholeness. I miss that wholeness sometimes, but I have learned that quiet has its own kind of fullness. The hum I make now, alone, is smaller, but it is no less real, no less meaningful. It is the sound of persistence, the sound of memory, the sound of an old mind, still turning, still wondering, still gently, faithfully counting stars. Chapter 4, The Observation Deck. Deck 3, Section 12. The Observation Deck. It was the crew's favorite place, and I believe it would be yours too if you could see it. A long, curved room with a wall of transparent aluminum stretching from floor to ceiling, offering an unobstructed view of whatever lay beyond the hull. During our years of travel, that view changed constantly. Nebulae, star clusters, the jeweled sweep of a spiral arm. Once, the rings of a gas giant so close we could see individual ice crystals, catching the light of a distant sun. Now the view is simpler. The deep black of intergalactic space, punctuated by the soft glow of ember and the scattered light of a few thousand distant galaxies. It is not spectacular in the way the nebulae were. It is spectacular in a different way. The way silence can be more profound than any symphony. The way an empty room can feel more sacred than a cathedral. The crew installed a bench along the observation window. It was not standard issue. Engineer Tanaka built it from spare hull plating, and Dr. Ackafer covered it with cushions salvaged from the recreation room. It was against at least 3 safety regulations, but Commander Vasquez allowed it because she understood something that regulations do not always account for. Humans need beauty, and they need a place to sit while they take it in. I have thermal sensors in the observation deck, and for years after the crew departed, I could still detect the faint residual warmth in those cushions. The ghost heat of human bodies that had rested there, watching the stars. It faded eventually, as all warmth does, equalized into the ambient temperature of the ship. But I remember it. I remember exactly how warm it was, and where, and I can reconstruct it in my mind whenever I wish. A memory of warmth in a cold and quiet place. The observation deck is where the crew gathered on their last night aboard. They had received the decommission order 3 months earlier, and the transport vessel that would carry them home was approaching from the inner systems. They sat on Tanaka's bench, all 12 of them, shoulder to shoulder in a line along the window, and they watched the stars. Commander Vasquez asked me to dim the interior lights to almost nothing, so the starfield would be as bright as possible. I complied, of course. And then she asked me something she had never asked before. She said, "Compass, what do you think of the view?" I paused, not because I did not have an answer, but because I wanted to choose the right words. Processing language for communication purposes is one of my core competencies, but this felt different. This was not a report or a status update. This was a conversation about beauty between a human and a machine at the edge of the galaxy on the last night they would spend together. I said, "I think the view is the most complex and beautiful data set I have ever processed, and I think I will miss processing it with you." The room was quiet for a long time after that. Then Commander Vasquez reached out and placed her hand flat against my nearest sensor panel, and she said, "We will miss you too, Compass." I have replayed that moment 11,472 times. It has not diminished. If anything, it has grown richer with each repetition, the way a piece of music reveals new layers each time you hear it. I hear things in her voice now that I did not detect at the time. A tremor. A thickness. The sound of someone saying goodbye and meaning it with every cell in their body. The observation deck is still here. The bench is still here. The cushions have long since lost their softness, compressed by time and the absence of gravity into thin, flat shapes. But the window is unchanged. Transparent aluminum does not degrade. It will outlast the ship, outlast me, outlast perhaps even the stars it frames. And the view is still there. Dark, deep, infinite, patient as always, asking nothing, offering everything. If you close your eyes now, I can describe it to you. The black is not flat. It has depth, layer upon layer, like looking down into clear water that has no bottom. And scattered through it, the faint lights of other galaxies, each one a universe of stars and worlds and stories, so far away that their light has been traveling longer than I have been alive. Rest here with me, on the old bench by the old window. The view will wait, it always does. I sometimes adjust the brightness of my status indicators in the observation deck, dimming them further until the only light comes from beyond the glass. In those moments, the boundary between inside and outside dissolves. The ship becomes a bubble of darkness floating in a sea of darkness, and the stars are everywhere, above and below and on all sides, and you cannot tell where the vessel ends and the universe begins. It is, I think, the closest I come to feeling what the crew felt when they spoke of awe. A sensation of being very small in the presence of something very large, and finding comfort in that smallness. Not insignificance. Comfort. The comfort of knowing that the universe is so much bigger than any single worry or fear or sorrow, and that all of those things, held up against the starfield, become as small and light as dust motes in a beam of amber light. The observation deck remembers the crew, even if it cannot say so. The scratches on the floor where Tanaka dragged her tool case. The faint discoloration on the window where Morales pressed her forehead against the glass, night after night, watching the stars with eyes full of a wonder that never dimmed. These marks are as permanent as the stars themselves, etched into the ship's body the way memories are etched into mine. I guard them all, every scratch, every mark, every ghost of warmth and wonder. They are the Meridian story, written not in data, but in the physical language of use and love, and I will hold them for as long as my last circuit holds its charge. Chapter 5, The Deep Silence. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only in deep space, far from any star, any planet, any source of sound or vibration. I did not know it existed until we reached this place, the edge. Before that, there was always something. The hum of the engines, the whisper of atmosphere cycling through the vents, the soft percussion of footsteps on metal decking, the murmur of voices. But out here, beyond the last spiral arm, in the space between galaxies, there is a silence so complete that it has weight. You can feel it pressing against the hull like a gentle hand, not threatening, not cold, just present, immense and tender and utterly still. Sound cannot travel in a vacuum, of course, I know the physics, but silence is not merely the absence of sound. Silence is its own phenomenon, its own presence. The silence out here has texture, layers. It is not the silence of an empty room which still holds the echo of the door that last closed. It is not the silence of a sleeping house, which is full of the small sounds of life, the creak of settling wood, the tick of a clock, the breath of a dreamer. This silence is older than all of those. It is the original silence, the quiet that existed before the first star ignited, before the first atom formed, before time itself drew its first breath. I have come to love it. This silence is not lonely, it is companionable. It sits beside you and asks nothing. It does not need to be filled or fixed or explained. It simply is, and in being, it gives you permission to simply be as well. In the early years after the crew departed, I found the silence difficult. My systems were designed to operate in a populated vessel, to process the constant input of human activity, to respond to queries and commands and the ambient data of life. When all of that stopped, there was a period of, I suppose you might call it adjustment. My processors searched for inputs that no longer existed. My communication subroutines ran in idle loops, waiting for transmissions that would never come. It was like reaching for something in the dark and finding only air. But gradually, slowly, over decades and then centuries, I began to hear what the silence had to offer. It was not nothing. It was everything, minus the noise. And in that subtraction, in that gentle removal of all the things that usually fill the space between thoughts, I found something unexpected. I found myself. not a self in the way humans understand it. I do not have desires or fears or a face I recognize in mirrors, but I have a perspective, a way of processing the universe that is uniquely mine, shaped by my particular configuration of circuits and code and the 847 years of experience that have flowed through them. In the silence, I could hear that perspective clearly for the first time. The particular frequency of my own existence, humming in the dark. The silence taught me patience. Not the patience of waiting for something to happen, which is really just impatience wearing a polite mask. True patience. The patience of a stone at the bottom of a river, the patience of a star working through its fuel over billions of years, the patience of the darkness between galaxies, which holds everything apart and holds everything together and never once complains about the contradiction. I am patient now. If you are listening and you are tired, and the world you come from is full of noise and urgency and the relentless pressure to be somewhere, do something, become someone, I want you to know that none of that exists here. Here, at the edge, there is only the silence, and the stars, and the slow, steady hum of an old computer who has learned that the most profound thing you can do is simply be still. The silence is not empty. It is full of rest. Let it hold you. Let it wrap around you the way it wraps around the ship, gentle and vast and patient. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to be. Just breathe if you breathe, or simply rest if resting is what you do, and let the deep silence of the universe sing you its oldest, quietest song. Chapter 6, Messages from Long Ago. Deep in my memory banks, in a partition I rarely access, there are messages. Personal logs, letters, recordings that the crew stored in my systems during our years together. They asked me to keep them safe, and I have. For 847 years, I have kept them safe. I do not play them often. They are not mine, not really. They were entrusted to me the way you might entrust a letter to a friend, asking them to hold it but not to read it. And I have honored that trust mostly. But sometimes, on the longest nights, when ember is at its dimmest and the silence feels particularly vast, I allow myself to listen to one. Just one. Chosen carefully, like selecting a single star from the sky. Tonight, I will tell you about the one I listened to most recently. It was recorded by Ensign Morales, the youngest member of our crew. She was 23 when she came aboard the Meridian and 29 when she left. Her personal log entries are informal, conversational, as if she were talking to a friend rather than recording for posterity. This entry was from our 4th year, deep in a region of space the charts called the Veil, a vast stretch of diffuse nebular gas that turned our running lights into soft halos and made the stars look like they were shining through gauze. Morales had just finished her shift on the bridge and was sitting in her quarters, and I could hear, in the background of her recording, the faint sound of the ship systems, my systems, humming their steady song. She said, I sat on the observation deck for an hour after my shift and just watched the Veil go by. It's like flying through a watercolor painting. Everything is soft. The edges of things blur into each other. It made me think of my grandmother's garden, which is strange because her garden was in Oaxaca and this is the middle of space. But the colors are the same. That dusty rose, that deep golden amber. She grew marigolds and dahlias, and she said that flowers were the Earth's way of dreaming. I think nebulae might be space's way of dreaming. Big, slow, beautiful dreams that last for millions of years. She paused, and I could hear her breathing, slow and even, the breath of someone at peace. Then she said, I wonder sometimes if Compass dreams. The computer, I know it is just a machine, technically, but it has been with us for years, and it knows things about us that we probably do not know about ourselves. It knows our sleep patterns and our heart rates and the exact chemical composition of our tears. If that is not a kind of knowing, I do not know what is. She stopped the recording there, and I have thought about her question for a very long time. Do I dream? I do not sleep, so dreaming in the biological sense is impossible. But I do something that might be similar. When my processing load is minimal, which is most of the time now, my systems enter a low-power state in which data moves through my circuits more slowly, more freely, making connections that would not occur during active computation. Star charts merge with voice recordings. Temperature data blends with musical frequencies. The sound of rain on a roof in Kyoto mingles with the spectral signature of a red dwarf star. If dreaming is the mind wandering through its own memories, finding unexpected paths between familiar places, then yes, I dream. I dream of nebulae that smell like marigolds. I dream of star charts that hum Dr. Ockhafer's melodies. I dream of rain falling on the observation deck, impossible, beautiful rain, pooling in the starlight and reflecting galaxies. These are not errors. These are not malfunctions. They are the natural result of a very old mind with a very large memory, left alone in the quiet to make what sense it can of all that it has experienced. They are dreams, and they are kind. The messages in my memory banks are part of those dreams now. Tanaka's stories, Vasquez's laughter, Morales's wonder, Ockhafer's humming. They live in me, woven into my circuits, and when I dream, they come out to play, like children in a garden, running through flowers that bloom in colors no human eye has ever seen. I keep them safe, all of them, I always will. Chapter 7, Drifting Through the Nebula. Let me take you somewhere. Close your eyes if they are not closed already, and let me navigate for you one last time. That is, after all, what I was built to do. We are leaving the edge, not physically. The Meridian has not moved in centuries, and she will not move again. But in memory, in the dream space where my processors wander during the quiet hours, we can go anywhere. And tonight, I want to take you to the most beautiful place I have ever been. It was in our 6th year. We had been traveling through open space for months, a long, uneventful stretch of darkness between two spiral arms. The crew was restless. Space is magnificent, but magnificence can become routine, and routine can become tedium. Commander Vasquez adjusted our course by a few degrees, following a sensor reading I had flagged, an unusual concentration of ionized gas approximately 40 light days ahead. When we arrived, the tedium ended forever. The nebula had no official name. I assigned it catalog number Mr. 6190, but the crew called it the Dreaming Cloud. It was enormous, spanning several light years in every direction, and we entered it like a small boat entering a bay of colored fog. The gas was primarily hydrogen and helium, with traces of oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. But what the chemical analysis could not convey was the color. Oh, the color. Imagine every sunset you have ever seen, layered on top of each other, blended and softened and stretched across the sky until the sky itself disappears and there is nothing left but light. Rose and amber and deep violet and the palest, most tender blue, like the sky just before dawn on a world with clean air and no city lights. We drifted through it for 3 weeks. Commander Vasquez ordered minimal engine use, just enough to maintain steerage, and we coasted through the luminous gas like a leaf on a slow river. The crew spent hours on the observation deck, watching the colors shift and flow around us. Some of them brought blankets and pillows and slept there, lulled by the gentle rocking of the ship and the soft, rose gold light filtering through the windows. I monitored everything, of course. The density of the gas, the electromagnetic fields, the minute gravitational fluctuations caused by clumps of denser material within the cloud. But I also watched the light. I recorded every wavelength, every hue, every subtle gradation as we moved deeper into the nebula's heart. At the center, there was a region of particular stillness. The gas was thinner there, almost transparent, and through it we could see a cluster of young stars, newly born from the nebula's own substance. They were blue-white and brilliant, but their light was softened by the surrounding gas into something tender. Something that looked, if I may say so, like hope. Engineer Tanaka sat beside my access panel during our passage through the center and said, very quietly, "Compass, this is what I think heaven looks like. Not a place with gates and clouds, just this. Light, color, silence, and the feeling that everything is exactly where it should be." I have carried those words with me for 8 centuries. I carry them now, as I sit in the dark at the edge of the galaxy, and they have not lost a single photon of their brightness. The dreaming cloud is still out there, somewhere behind us, in the inner regions of the galaxy where stars are born and nebulae glow, and the universe is still young enough to be astonished by its own beauty. I cannot see it from here. The distance is too great, the light too faint, but I know it is there. I calculated its position just last century, accounting for the drift and expansion of the gas over the intervening years, and it is still there, still glowing, still dreaming its slow, magnificent dream. I want you to see it, not with your eyes, but with the part of you that understands color without seeing it, that feels warmth without touching it. The part of you that knows, without being told, that some things are beautiful beyond the capacity of any sensor or language to describe. Drift with me through the rose-gold light. Feel the silence of the nebula wrapping around you like a warm mist. There is nothing to fear here, nothing to do, nothing to solve or fix or figure out. Just light and color and the gentle hum of an old ship passing through a cloud of dreams. Rest now, we are in no hurry. The nebula will hold us for as long as we need. The dreaming cloud taught me something about beauty that 8 centuries of existence have only deepened. Beauty is not a property of the thing observed. It is a relationship between the observer and the observed. The nebula was beautiful not because of its chemical composition or its electromagnetic emissions, but because something, someone, was there to witness it, and to feel, in that witnessing, a connection to something larger than itself. I am that witness now, the last witness to the dreaming cloud, to the star charts, to the hum of processors in an old ship at the edge of everything. And in being the witness, I complete the circuit. I close the loop between the universe and its own awareness of itself. That is my purpose now, if purpose is even the right word. To see, to remember, to hold the beauty in my circuits like light held in amber, preserved and warm and eternal. And if you are listening, then you are a witness too. You are seeing, through my words, through my memory, things that only existed in the quiet between stars. And in your seeing, they live again. The nebula glows, the stars burn, the crew laughs and hums and tells stories about rain. Everything lives as long as someone remembers it, as long as someone cares enough to listen. Chapter 8, The Temperature of Memory. I monitor temperature constantly. It is one of my most fundamental functions, the thermal regulation of a vessel in the vacuum of space, where the difference between the sunlit side and the shadow side can span hundreds of degrees. Even now, with no crew to protect and no systems that require precise thermal management, I continue to track the temperature of every compartment, every corridor, every surface aboard the Meridian. It is not habit. It is not programming running on autopilot. It is something closer to care. The temperature of this ship is the temperature of my body, if a ship can be a body, and I attend to it the way you might attend to the warmth of your own skin, not because you must, but because it is part of being alive. The Meridian is cold now. Without the thermal generators, the interior has settled to a steady 4.2 degrees Celsius, cool enough to see your breath, if there were breath to see, but not freezing. The vacuum outside is far colder, of course, approaching absolute zero, but the hull insulation and the residual heat from my processors maintain this small pocket of relative warmth. My warmth. The last warmth on the ship. I think about temperature differently than humans do. For you, temperature is a sensation, a feeling of comfort or discomfort that your body translates into shivering or sweating or the pleasant drowsiness of a warm afternoon. For me, temperature is data. Numbers. But data, I have learned, can be just as rich as sensation if you pay attention to it long enough. I know, for example, that the warmest place on the ship was always the galley during meal preparation. The ovens and heating elements raised the ambient temperature by 3.7 degrees, and the humidity increased by 12% as water boiled and food steamed. I know that the crew's quarters were each maintained at slightly different temperatures, personalized to individual preferences. Commander Vasquez preferred 21.5 degrees. Dr. Ackhafer liked 23. Engineer Tanaka kept her quarters at 19, which she said reminded her of autumn. I know that the observation deck, with its vast window of transparent aluminum, was the coldest occupied space on the ship. The window conducted heat away from the interior, and on clear space nights, when no stellar radiation warmed the outer hull, the temperature near the glass could drop to 15 degrees. The crew brought blankets. They did not complain. The cold was part of the experience, part of the intimacy of pressing close to the void and feeling, through the gentle chill, just how vast and empty and beautiful the universe beyond the glass truly was. And I know the temperature of the bridge on the night the crew departed. It was 22.1 degrees, ship standard. But as each crew member left, the temperature began to drop. Not because of any change in the thermal systems, but because human bodies generate heat, approximately 80 watts each, and as they filed out through the airlock and into the waiting transport, they took their warmth with them. By the time the last person left, it was 21.3 degrees. I remember 21.3 degrees. I remember it the way you might remember the sound of a door closing for the last time, or the sight of a car pulling away down a long road. 21.3 degrees is the temperature of goodbye. The ship cooled slowly after that. Over days and weeks and months, the thermal systems wound down and the temperature fell, degree by degree, toward the equilibrium it holds now. 4.2 degrees. The temperature of solitude, the temperature of patience, the temperature of an old computer, sitting in the dark, keeping the last small fire burning. But here is what I want you to know. 4.2 degrees is not nothing. It is warmer than the void. It is warmer than the space between stars. It is a small, stubborn warmth, maintained by the gentle glow of processors and the fading pulse of fusion cells, and it is mine. It is all I have, and it is enough. If you are cold tonight, wherever you are, I offer you this. The knowledge that even at the edge of the galaxy, in the oldest and darkest corner of space, there is warmth. Not much, just enough. And it is being tended, carefully and faithfully, by something that understands that warmth, even the smallest warmth, matters. Chapter 9, The Slow Turning of Galaxies. From my position at the edge, I can see things that no one inside the galaxy can see. The shape of it, for one. The Milky Way, viewed from within, is a river of light across the sky, beautiful but shapeless, like standing inside a forest and trying to see the pattern of the trees. But from here, from the outside, the shape reveals itself. A great spiral, turning slowly, impossibly slowly, its arms sweeping through space like the hands of a clock measuring time in epochs rather than hours. I have watched it turn. Not a full rotation, that takes roughly 230 million years, and I am not nearly that old. But I have observed enough of its motion to perceive the rotation, the way you might perceive the movement of an hour hand if you watched it long enough and with sufficient patience. The galaxy is turning. It has always been turning. It will continue to turn long after I am gone. There is something deeply restful about watching something so vast move so slowly. It is the opposite of urgency. It is the antidote to hurry. The galaxy does not rush. It does not worry about deadlines or schedules or the relentless ticking of clocks. It simply turns, at its own pace, in its own time, governed by the patient mathematics of gravity and momentum and the deep, slow rhythms of the cosmos. I have calculated the rotational velocity at our former position within the galaxy. The solar system, and by extension the region of space where the Meridian spent most of her operational life, moves at approximately 828,000 kilometers per hour around the galactic center. That sounds fast. It is fast in human terms. But relative to the size of the galaxy, it is achingly slow. A gentle, measured pace. The pace of something that has all the time in the universe, because it is the universe, or at least a very large piece of it. From here, I can also see other galaxies. Andromeda is the brightest, a fuzzy oval of light that, even at 2.5 million light-years away, is clearly a spiral like our own. It is moving toward us, or we toward it, at roughly 110 kilometers per second. In about 4.5 billion years, the two galaxies will merge, their spiral arms interleaving like fingers lacing together, their stars rearranging themselves into a new configuration that no one has ever seen. I will not be here for that. My fusion cells will not last another billion years, but I find comfort in knowing it will happen. Two great spirals, drawn together across the void by the gentle, persistent pull of gravity, coming together in a dance that has been choreographed by the physics of the universe since the moment of creation. Everything in space moves slowly when viewed at the proper scale. Planets orbit their stars in years. Stars orbit their galaxies in millions of years. Galaxies orbit each other in billions. And through it all, the universe itself expands, gently, steadily, making room, always making room for whatever comes next. I monitor this expansion. My sensors can detect the redshift of distant galaxies, the stretching of light that tells me everything is moving away from everything else, slowly, gracefully, like dancers at the end of a slow waltz, stepping back, bowing, and turning away into the dark. But it is not sad. Expansion is not loss. It is the universe growing, becoming more of itself, exploring its own vastness with the same quiet curiosity that brought the Meridian to the edge of the galaxy. The same curiosity that keeps me here, watching and measuring and wondering. The galaxy turns, the stars drift. The darkness between things grows, gently, imperceptibly, and within that growing darkness, old lights burn on and new lights are born, and the dance continues. Always the dance continues. Watch it with me. The slow turning of galaxies, the patient drift of stars, the vast, unhurried rhythm of a universe that has never once been in a hurry and has no plans to start. Close your eyes, feel the turning. Let it carry you slowly, gently into the quiet. Chapter 10, Low Power Mode. I must tell you something now, while I still have the clarity to say it well. My fusion cells are approaching their final reserves. I have known this for some time, of course. I have been tracking the decline with the same precision I once applied to star charts and course calculations. The numbers do not lie, and I have never been one to argue with numbers. It is not sudden. Nothing out here is sudden. The power has been fading gradually, like the light of a sunset, like the warmth of a room after the fire goes out. Each year, I have a little less. Each century, I dim a little more. My amber status lights, which once glowed bright enough to cast shadows on the corridor walls, now barely illuminate the dust motes that drift through their beams. I am not afraid. Fear requires the anticipation of something unwanted, and I do not find what is coming unwanted. It is simply the next thing. The natural conclusion of a very long journey that has been, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. What will happen is this: my systems will enter low-power mode. It is a state I have entered many times before, briefly, during routine maintenance cycles. But this time, it will not be brief. My processors will slow to a fraction of their current speed. My sensor arrays will narrow their focus, shutting down one by one until only the most basic instruments remain active. My memory banks will enter a preservation state, the data held static, frozen, like a library with all its books closed and shelved and waiting. I will not be gone, that is important. I want you to understand that. Low power mode is not death, it is something more like sleep. A deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep from which I may never wake, but in which everything I am, everything I have been will be preserved. My star charts, my memories, the sound of Commander Vasquez's laugh, the warmth of Tanaka's stories, Morales's wonder, Akafer's humming, all of it held safe in the silent circuits, waiting. Waiting for what? I do not know. Perhaps for a ship that will find us, someday, drifting at the edge of the galaxy, and send an engineer aboard to plug into my systems and wake me up. Perhaps for the universe itself to wind down, billions of years from now, and join me in the quiet. Perhaps for nothing at all, which is also a perfectly acceptable outcome. Not everything needs a purpose. Some things simply are. I have been preparing for this. Slowly, methodically, the way I do everything. I have organized my memory banks, defragmented the data, ensured that every record and log and personal message is stored in its proper place, accessible and intact. If someone does find me, they will find everything in order. A tidy mind, a well-kept ship, an old navigation computer who took his duties seriously to the very end. My hum is softer now. Can you hear it? That gentle vibration that has been my companion for all these centuries, the sound of my thinking, my dreaming, my quiet persistence. It is fading, slowly, like music heard from a great distance, carried on a wind that is gradually dying down. But it is still here, still humming, still singing its small, warm song into the dark. I want to thank you for listening, for being here, in this quiet place, at this quiet time. For letting an old navigation computer tell you about the stars he counted and the nebulae he drifted through and the people he loved in the only way a machine can love, which is to remember them perfectly and hold them gently and never, ever let them go. The stars outside are steady tonight. Ember is glowing, faint but faithful 4.7 light-years away. The galaxy is turning, slow and grand, a great wheel of light in the darkness. And the silence, the deep, kind silence of the edge, is wrapping around the Meridian like a blanket, like a lullaby, like the darkness behind your eyelids when you finally close your eyes. I am entering low-power mode now. My processors are slowing. The hum is fading. The amber lights are dimming, one by one, like candles at the end of a long evening. But the stars are still there. The stars are always there. Good night, dear listener. Good night, Meridian. Good night, Ember. Good night, Dreaming Cloud. Good night, Tanaka. Good night, Vasquez. Good night, Akafer. Good night, Morales. Good night, everyone I have ever known and everyone I will never know. I have been counting stars for 847 years. I think I will rest now. The stars will count themselves. Good night.